finance has been, I think, cured. And if you're watching this and you're like, BS, TJ, I've talked to 300 lenders and I can't get anybody to finance my Barndo, drop a comment right here. Let us know. I want to know where you're at, and I want to connect you to some of my people to see if they can solve that problem for you. What's up, everybody, and welcome to the Barndo Show. My name's TJ, and I am the co-founder and CEO of the Barndo Co. We've been building Barndominiums for the last 4 years, and we have built hundreds of them and worked with thousands of families to help them achieve their piece of the American dream. And today is episode 9 of Barndo 101, and we're talking about one of the most important pieces of your Barndominium journey, and that's financing, right? It's amazing to me that this is still such a touchy subject in the year 2025, because I feel like we've done so much work to make Barndominium so accessible that I often forget that there are people in different areas and builders in certain areas that are still struggling to find lenders to work with to make Barndominiums available and accessible to people. So I just want to talk a little bit about this. Maybe you're new to the housing market. You know, maybe you've never built or bought a house and you're just confused as to why people talk about financing all the time. So let's talk a little bit about, like, what is a traditional mortgage, right? So your traditional mortgage is going to typically be, and it's changing all the time, is going to be a 30-year fixed rate mortgage where you find a home to buy, you put whatever money down that it has to be from 0%, depending on what kind of, system you're in, to a conventional, which is typically 20% down. And then you're financing the rest. You go to closing, the bank's going to fund the mortgage. You're going to get the house, and then you make payments on it for the next 30 years or until you pay it off. And that's kind of standard layman terms way the mortgage works. So what about building? What's different? Well, I guess in some scenarios, you could contact a builder and they've got a lot and they build the house for you, and then at the end you go and buy it with the same traditional mortgage. But the way we do it, and what seems to be the most common in the Barndominium world, is you own land or you're shopping for land and you're wanting to buy a piece of land, and then you're wanting to contract with us to build. And so there is a thing called a construction loan. And this differs slightly from your traditional mortgage because they're actually financing the build, and then at the very end, it converts to that traditional mortgage. So, there's just a few extra steps, like an extra front-end year where they're funding the actual construction, and then it rolls over. And so, again, in this, and I'm not a lender by any means. I'm not a lender. Barndo Co is not a lender. We have great partnerships. And if you are in the market here in the Southeast and you're in one of our build areas and this is a concern for you, I recommend heading over to thebarndoco.com, clicking the Contact Us button, filling out the little form, and letting one of our representatives get on the phone with you, because we can actually share with you a link to connect with a ton of approved lenders in our network that make this so easy and can talk so much more sophisticated about it than I can. But the difference, again, when you go into a construction loan is sometimes there's a one-time close, other times there's a two-part close, and it really depends on what your specific needs are. And there's some advantages to it, right? Like you can gamify this a little bit by comparing one to the other and depending on where the market is and where they believe it'll go and all that. But like, I'm going to take all that off the table. If you go and do a two-time close, right? So basically, you're going to buy your land and you're going to close on that and the construction, and then they're going to fund the construction of the loan, and you're going to close on that, and you're going to pay interest-only payments for the duration, and it's based off of how much money was paid out. So, like, let's say that they pay you, $100,000 for your land, and then they put, another $40,000 down against the construction, and they're, so your first payment, you're paying the interest payments on $140,000, and then, a month into the process, they release another $40,000 for construction, and now you're paying on $180,000, and then the next month they release another $100,000, and now you're paying $280,000. And that balance grows as construction progresses, and then you get to the end, and you go to closing a second time. Right? So you're going to pay closing costs on the front end of that loan, And then on a 2-part, you're going to go pay closing costs again at the end. And when you close the second time, they roll that balance over to a traditional mortgage, and then the home and the land and everything's all combined. Okay, so that's one way of doing it. And again, there's gamification. There's a bunch of other details in that. I'll connect you to somebody who can explain it more thoroughly, but I want you to understand just the basics here. The other side is a one-time construction loan where you go in, you pay to close, and they fund it same way, and you're paying interest-only payments as money's being distributed to us as the builder, and you're buying down whatever piece as they distribute money to us, and you're paying that monthly amount. And then at the very end, it automatically converts to a standard mortgage at the predetermined rate when you created the one-time closed construction loan, and it automatically converts. So the advantage, hey, I don't have to pay closing costs a second time, right? The possible disadvantage is when you close on that loan, if you close at a 7% interest rate, when you get to the end, you're in a 7% mortgage. If you did a 2-part close, the gamification piece is like, hey, I closed at 7%, but when we got to the end of construction, rates had dropped to 6.5%. And so when I paid the second closing fees, I got in a 6.5% rate mortgage. So that's kind of an idea. So you could put the rest of that together in your mind, but that's the biggest difference in the 3 ways that lenders are looking at these loans from a very basic point of view of traditional mortgage to a construction mortgage or a construction loan versus a one-time or a 2-time close loan, and why that's important. And there's a bunch of different things that go into that. Like if you already own your land, you can sometimes use your land as collateral in lieu of down payment to close on these types of things. If you're looking to buy land and construct at the same time, you kind of have to have those things coordinated very similar time frames, or you can do the close on the land and then the construction loan, and then the 2-part close kind of becomes a benefit to you. If you're VA, it changes the game completely, because in the VA situation, most oftentimes you're going to be shopping for land and looking to build. So we're assuming you don't already have land and you're using a VA loan to just do construction, but you're utilizing the VA and you're going to go buy a piece of dirt and build. It gets a little trickier. So they're going to want to know, what is the cost of the land? What is it going to cost to construct this home completely? And then they're going to calculate all the fees and the carrying costs and all those interest payments along the way, because you're not going to have those coming out of your pocket in a VA. And so there's a lot more work that goes into that. And sometimes the end result number looks higher than you were anticipating, but it's not really like costing you more to build it. It's just there's a lot of fees, closing costs, and all these different things, and carrying costs for the duration of construction. And all that kind of gets wrapped up into one big chunk that we then charge the bank to fund that construction for the duration of the project. And so if you're a VA and you're looking to shop for land and build with us, we have to dance fast. So, your ability to linger in design gets shorter and shorter by your ability to create a contract with a due diligence period of time on land, so that who's selling you the land is motivated to keep selling you the land and not look for another buyer. So that's just another thing to keep in mind. But that sounds very complicated, I know, because I'm saying it and I'm like, man, I'm definitely not a lender. I'm a Barndo guy. But I want you to understand the importance of this. And the reason why lending gets brought up all the time is not like the details of how those things work. I just wanted to help you if you just have no idea, right? You're new here. But the biggest complication is Barndominiums sometimes are considered a niche, and they're kind of an oddball product. And so a lot of institutionalized lenders have kind of said like, oh, we don't do Barndos. Now, we don't encounter that anymore at all here. Like, it's very, very, very rare that we run into that. And if we do, oftentimes it's like a broker situation where they're just unfamiliar, and so they just say, hey, we don't do that. Because, then we've got to tell them and build a relationship, and then they've got to kind of go and like regurgitate that to the bank that they're working with. And a lot just gets lost in translation, and the juices ain't worth the squeeze oftentimes for those brokers. So, a lot of times, the reason why it gets immediately pushed away is because the bank and the lending institution just doesn't understand what's being built. And they're looking at it going like, it's really hard to find comps and insurance purposes. You've heard me talk about this on multiple episodes. If you've looked back at any of our financing segments that we've done in the past, But the biggest thing is like they just don't know what's being built, and they've got to be able to equate it to market value. And market value is highly dependent upon what the market is doing and what's available inventory and what has sold and what hasn't sold and what's on the market to be sold and what is the demand for that product. And so they want to kind of treat it as its own little thing. And so what we did in the very beginning, 4 years ago when we first got started, was we went straight to the banks first. I had at least 10-to-1 meetings with banks. Then I did clients in the very beginning of Barndo because I wanted to understand why this was such a big deal. And so we'd meet with the bank. They'd give us a list of reasons why they couldn't, fund these or why they didn't, take the time to try to. And then we would take that and kind of work with our engineering team to come up with a way to build so that it was more comparable to what they've seen. And so with relative ease, we created a build system at Barndo Co that fits their requirements. It's built in such a way that it's very easy for appraisers to get like values. Your biggest struggle is going to be we build a lot of these in rural America, and in rural areas, there's not a lot of comps a lot of times for appraisers. So appraisals are important. And so if you're building in the middle of nowhere, right, you're like, I got my oasis, man. I got my 100 acres in the middle of a million acres, and my closest neighbor is 45 minutes away. That might be a hindrance to you in the appraisal process. Not always, but it could be. But basically what we did is we took a familiar idea of how traditional homes were built. And I think really the biggest hinge for them was they wanted to see wood construction because that speaks the language, right? So we do that with our post frame. And they wanted to see a permanent foundation and not see poles down in the ground. And look, I got really good friends all across this country that are in this space, and they bury poles, and they have lenders that work with them. So if you're in an area and you're talking to a builder that builds that way, I'm not bashing. I'm just telling you what we had to do because our objective was to get as many people into a Barndo as possible, and we wanted to be able to utilize every lending option out there. And so we designed a system that played nice with the banks, that insurance carriers seem to love and treat like a custom home, and appraisers would look at blueprints and gather information and treat us like a custom home without us having to play games and go to the bank like, oh, we're building a custom home. I hear people say that all the time, just don't tell the bank it's a Barndo. They're going to know. They're going to know. And our plans literally say the Barndo Co. And so if we can design a system that banks will compete against, then you should be in good hands. You just take a little bit of time to understand how it works, understand what their drawbacks and holdups could be, and have a direct conversation with the bank. It's 2025. There's literally tens of thousands of Barndominiums popping up all across the United States. It's more common than it used to be, and it should become easier and easier. And again, even if you live in an area that we don't build in, if you're struggling to find a finance option, reach out to us on that contact form, and you can literally just put in the reply. So when we reach out to say, hey, man, I'm in Kansas, and I'm trying to get finance for my Barndo, we are more than happy to connect you with our group of lenders, and most of them can lend in 40-plus states across the United States. And we'll connect you with them, and hopefully they can help you and work with your contractor to get you approved for a more traditional way of financing, where you're not, having to play all these different games and get in these high interest and short-term type loans that I see a lot of people talking about, especially it seems in the Midwest. So if you're somewhere and you're wanting to build a Barndo and we can't build it for you, reach out. We will help you. We will connect you to our group of lenders, and let them work with you. And, that's just a favor. We're just going to wipe our hands and say, hey, you're in good hands. These guys have done great with us. They're writing hundreds and hundreds of loans. We trust them, and you take it from there. But yeah, I think in 2025, a fear of finance should not be the number one consumer question anymore. I think you should be more concerned with product, and you should be more concerned with process than you are financing, because the product that you get is what's going to protect your long-term investment. And I think that the financing has relaxed enough to where you should be able to get a multitude of products financed, because the banks were very educated in the beginning on why they didn't do it, but now that it's widely adopted and we've sent thousands of people and got them approved for mortgages to build Barndos. I don't know that the banks are saying no to people based off of the product. And so I would just say, as a consumer, if you're coming into this and you're new to this, research more on the product, research more on the process. And when I say process, I'm talking, what is the process for you to meet with them and make sure that you're getting what you want in there? Look at long-term value options. And again, this goes back to the way we, onboard clients and things. Like, we want you to see what we offer, because a lot of times our base is substantially upgraded to other people's base. And we do it for a multitude of reasons, because energy efficiency, because we're trying to build 100-year homes. So I would understand the product and understand the process and not sweat as much about finance. Finance has been, I think, cured. And if you're watching this and you're like, BS, TJ, I've talked to 300 lenders and I can't get anybody to finance my Barndo, drop a comment right here. Let us know. I want to know where you're at, and I want to connect you to some of my people to see if they can solve that problem for you. Because again, we've done a ton of work, and we've invested a lot of time and energy and money into creating a solution that's helped a lot of people be able to make this achievable for them, with a multitude of things, from USDA type loans, FHA loans, VA loans, conventional mortgages, 1-part, 2-part construction. There's so many different ways to go about this, that very, very seldom have we had someone fall away because of financing, other than the fact that maybe they made a purchase or something happened where they couldn't get approved with a lender to get financing. And even with that, a lot of our lenders have really good programs, so maybe you can't do it today, but they could put you on a 3-month, 6-month, or 12-month journey to get you to a point where you could. So don't be afraid to reach out. We'd love to talk about it. And don't let finance, be the biggest F word in your vocabulary when you think about Barndominiums. Like, it doesn't have to be. It's not as hard as it used to be. And realistically, I don't think it's that big of a hang-up anymore. But again, you got to remember, when you're online on Facebook and in forums, and you're in these groups with millions of people, and like I say, we run several of these groups, in Facebook particularly, millions of people. And what you got to remember is, in a group with 1 million people, probably less than 10,000 of them have built a Barndo or are building a Barndo, and the rest is 990,000 people's opinions who don't know what they're talking about. It's just an open forum, and people love to interject and put their thoughts on there. And they could have watched a YouTube video from 13 years ago where someone was talking about how hard it was to get financed, and that's relative to them in their mind because they saw it, and it's true, and it's content. And so I wouldn't sweat it as much. You'll get overwhelmed with information online, and a lot of it's terrible information. There's a lot of it that's terrible information. And there's also a weird phenomenon that we found. People that build Barndos almost want to vault keep it. So, like, they'll build a Barndo and they love their Barndo, but then they'll simultaneously, like, tell people, don't do it. Don't do it. And it's like, as it gains popularity, a lot of people, they want to protect it and keep other people away. And it's a weird phenomenon. I don't know what causes that. But there is a lot of that. Like, people don't want it to be accessible. People don't want it to be their neighbor can build one too, because that's like their thing, And so it's really strange. Like, you'll see people on there like, I wouldn't do it again. And you go to their personal page, and all they talk about is how awesome their house is, and how incredible it was. And like, we even have that. We have clients who built with us and will literally go out of their way to tell other people, don't build with them. And again, you click their personal page. They love it. They love their house. They love it's weird. Sidebar there, right? Finance is not a big deal. I wouldn't worry too much about financing. And if you're in a place where you just can't figure it out, again, reach out to us. We'll do everything we can to help you, even if you're not in an area we build in. So if you like this video where we're debunking these myths around Barndos, check out this video where we do that again. And hopefully you'll see something there that you enjoy as well.